8 Habits No One Sees from Korean Grandmothers to Shrink Your Waist in 21 Days. The alarm cut through the 6:30 a.m. darkness like a blade. Sarah's hand slapped the phone screen twice before the sound died, leaving only the hum of the heater and her own shallow breathing. 7 hours of sleep. She'd tracked it. 7 full hours. And yet her body felt like it had been dragged behind a truck. She sat up slowly, feeling the tightness in her lower back, the heaviness in her legs. The jeans she'd worn yesterday were folded on the chair. Size 12, tight around the waist now. She'd been a size 8 3 years ago, before the promotion, before the late-night emails and the drive-through dinners and the wine that helped her unwind, but never really did. In the bathroom mirror, her face looked puffy, dark circles. She was 37 years old and looked 45 on a good day. The expensive face cream sat on the counter, half empty, promising results it had never delivered. She splashed cold water on her face and reached for her phone. Instagram was already open. A fitness influencer's post. 5 a.m. club. No excuses. Your body is your responsibility. Sarah closed the app. She'd tried the 5 a.m. workouts. She'd tried keto, paleo, intermittent fasting, meal prep Sundays. The gym 3 times a week, then 5 times a week, then every day until her knees hurt and she couldn't sleep at all. Nothing stuck. Nothing worked. Or maybe she was the one who didn't work. Maybe she was just broken. The kitchen was small, cluttered with delivery containers she hadn't thrown out yet. She made coffee. Black, no sugar, because that's what the last diet coach had said, and stared out the window at the grey Seattle morning. Across the courtyard, in the building next to hers, she could see Mrs. Park's kitchen light already on. The old Korean woman was always up early, moving around her small apartment with a rhythm Sarah couldn't understand. She was in her 80s, maybe older, and yet she seemed to glide through her days with a calmness that made Sarah feel even more frantic by comparison. 2 weeks ago, Sarah had been waiting for the elevator when Mrs. Park appeared, carrying a cloth bag from the Korean grocery store 3 blocks away. She'd walked there, at 80-something, in the rain. When Sarah asked if she needed help with the bag, Mrs. Park had smiled and said, "I walk every day. Keeps the body awake." Sarah had nodded politely, but inside she'd thought, "I can barely get myself to the car." That afternoon, Sarah's doctor called with her lab results. The voice on the phone was calm, clinical, but the words landed heavy. Pre-diabetic, cholesterol creeping up, blood pressure in the watch zone, fatty liver showing on the ultrasound. Nothing catastrophic yet, just a slow descent. Dr. Ramirez wanted to see her in 2 weeks. "We need to talk about lifestyle changes," she'd said. Sarah had heard that phrase 100 times. It always meant the same thing. You're failing at being a human body. She sat on the couch that night with her laptop open, searching how to lose weight when nothing works. The internet gave her the same answers it always did. Calorie deficit, cardio, strength training, willpower, discipline, consistency. She'd tried all of it. She'd white-knuckled her way through so many diets her body didn't trust food anymore. Hunger felt like failure. Fullness felt like shame. Then she saw it, a documentary clip in her recommendations. Why Korean Grandmothers Stay Slim Without Gyms. She clicked. The video showed elderly women in Seoul walking through markets, sitting on the floor of their homes, eating small bowls of rice and vegetables, laughing with friends over steaming pots of soup. They weren't thin in the hollow, starved way the West worshipped. They were solid, alive, present, and none of them looked like they were suffering. The camera zoomed in on one woman's kitchen. On the counter sat a large ceramic jar, its lid slightly ajar, red liquid visible inside. The narrator explained, "This is kimchi, a fermented vegetable that has been part of Korean culture for centuries. But it's not just food, it's a philosophy, patience, process, balance." Sarah paused the video and stared at that jar. Something about it felt important, though she couldn't say why. It wasn't a gym membership or a diet plan or a magic pill. It was just a jar, but it had been there for centuries, quietly doing its work, while the West burned through fad after fad. The next morning, Sarah found herself knocking on Mrs. Park's door. She wasn't sure what she was asking for. Advice? Permission? Hope? When the door opened, Mrs. Park smiled, unsurprised, as if she'd been expecting this. "Come in," she said. "I just made tea." Sarah stepped inside. The apartment smelled different from hers. Cleaner, somehow, but also alive. There was a scent of garlic, sesame, something tangy and bright. The furniture was low to the ground. The kitchen counter was almost empty, except for a wooden cutting board and a single ceramic jar, just like the one in the video. Mrs. Park poured tea into 2 small cups and gestured for Sarah to sit on a cushion at the low table. Sarah tried to sit cross-legged but felt awkward, her hips tight, her back straining. "You sit in chairs too much," Mrs. Park said, not unkindly. "The floor teaches the body to work." Sarah looked around the small apartment. There was no clutter, no junk food, no microwave, just space, order, and that jar on the counter, quietly fermenting in the morning light. "I don't know how to do this," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I've tried everything. I'm so tired." Mrs. Park sipped her tea, then set the cup down gently. "You try too hard," she said. "You think you must fight your body, but the body is not the enemy. The enemy is the life you built around it." Sarah stared at her, not understanding yet, but feeling something shift. Mrs. Park stood and walked to the counter. She opened the ceramic jar, and the sharp, alive smell of kimchi filled the room. She spooned a small portion into a bowl and handed it to Sarah. "This is not diet food," Mrs. Park said. "This is life food. It takes time. You can't rush it, but it works." Sarah looked down at the bowl, at the red-stained cabbage glistening in the morning light. It wasn't an answer. It wasn't a plan. It was just a jar, a woman, and a question she hadn't known she needed to ask. What if the problem wasn't her body, but the world she'd been forcing it to survive in? If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar, and stay with us for the next chapters. The kimchi tasted nothing like Sarah expected. Sharp, funky, alive in a way that made her tongue wake up. She chewed slowly, and Mrs. Park watched her with quiet approval. "You eat too fast in America," Mrs. Park said, "always running even when you sit." Sarah realized it was true. She couldn't remember the last time she'd actually tasted her food. Most meals were eaten standing at the counter, scrolling her phone, or hunched over her laptop at work. Food was fuel, or punishment, or comfort, but never just food. Mrs. Park explained the 8 habits, not as a diet, but as a way of life her mother had taught her, and her grandmother before that. She didn't call them habits. She called them rhythms. And she didn't promise that Sarah's waist would shrink in 21 days. She promised something quieter, that Sarah's body would remember how to rest. The first habit was walking. Not exercise, just walking. To the store, to the post office, up the hill to the park. Mrs. Park walked everywhere, her steps small and steady, her breathing calm. She explained neat, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, though she didn't use that term. She just said, the body was made to move all day, not sit all day, and then punish itself for an hour. Sarah started the next morning. She parked her car farther from the office. She took the stairs instead of the elevator. She walked to the coffee shop instead of using the drive-through. Her Fitbit buzzed. 8,000 steps by noon. She hadn't even tried. She'd just stopped sitting still. The second habit was the floor. Mrs. Park showed her how to sit, kneel, squat. At first, Sarah's hips screamed, her knees cracked. But Mrs. Park was patient. "You don't have to sit for long," she said. "Just sit, stand, sit again. The floor will teach you." Sarah started eating breakfast on a cushion at her coffee table instead of standing at the counter. She folded laundry, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor. Her core engaged without her thinking about it. Her posture straightened. It wasn't a workout. It was just gravity asking her body to respond. The third habit was fermentation. Mrs. Park gave her a small jar of kimchi and told her to eat a spoonful with every meal. Sarah was skeptical. How could pickled cabbage do anything? But she read about probiotics, gut health, appetite regulation. The science was there, buried under decades of Western diet culture that had taught her to fear food instead of trust it. Within 3 days, she noticed something strange. Her stomach felt calmer. The bloating that had been constant for years started to ease. She wasn't as hungry between meals, and when she was hungry, it felt clean, not desperate. The fourth habit was portion rhythm. Mrs. Park invited her over for dinner, and Sarah saw it. The table covered in small dishes, banchan, each one different. Spinach, bean sprouts, pickled radish, steamed egg, a tiny portion of grilled fish, a small bowl of rice. 15 flavors, 15 textures, but none of it excessive. "You eat many things, but small," Mrs. Park said. "The brain gets satisfied with variety, not volume." Sarah started buying smaller plates. She stopped filling her bowl to the brim. She ate slowly, tasting each bite. It felt strange, almost rebellious. Every diet she'd ever tried had told her to measure, weigh, count. This was different. This was just eating like a human. The fifth habit was cold. Mrs. Park washed her dishes in cold water by hand, standing. She slept with the window cracked, even in winter, her room cool enough to see her breath. She explained brown fat activation, thermogenesis, the way the body burns energy to stay warm. Sarah started small. Cold showers in the morning, just 30 seconds at the end. Turning down the thermostat at night, walking outside without immediately bundling up. Her body shivered, then adapted. She felt more awake. The sixth habit was meal timing. Dinner at 6 p.m., never later. Kitchen closed by 7. 14-hour overnight fast every night without counting it as fasting, just as not eating while sleeping. Insulin dropped. Autophagy kicked in. The body rested. Sarah moved her dinner earlier. It felt wrong at first, like she was depriving herself or being too rigid, but then she noticed she slept better. Her stomach wasn't churning at midnight. Her body had time to digest, repair, rest. The seventh habit was breath. Mrs. Park didn't meditate formally, but her breathing was slow, nasal, steady. She moved through her kitchen like a dancer, never rushed, never frantic. Parasympathetic, calm, cortisol low. Sarah downloaded a breathing app. 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. She did it while making tea, while walking, while waiting in line. Her heart rate slowed. The constant hum of anxiety in her chest eased just a little. The eighth habit was community. Mrs. Park never ate alone. She called neighbors, invited friends, shared meals with the Korean church group on Sundays. Eating was social, not solitary. Connection slowed the pace, increased satisfaction, dissolved the shame Sarah had always carried around food. Sarah started inviting her co-worker Jenny over for dinner. At first, Jenny teased her. "You're like going full Korean grandma now." But when Sarah served the meal, small portions, many dishes, slow pace, Jenny got quiet. At the end, she leaned back and said, "I actually feel satisfied, not stuffed, just good." Sarah smiled. That was the word. Good. Not perfect, not controlled, just good. By the end of the second week, Sarah noticed something she hadn't expected. She wasn't thinking about food all the time. The constant mental loop. What can I eat? What should I avoid? How many calories did I fail today? Had quieted. She wasn't on a diet, she was just living. And her body, slowly, was starting to trust her again. 3 weeks in, Sarah's jeans felt different. Not loose exactly, but less angry. The waistband didn't dig into her stomach anymore. She stood in front of the mirror one Saturday morning and lifted her shirt. The bloating was gone. Her waist looked defined. Not flat, not magazine cover perfect, but Hers, real, alive. She stepped on the scale, down 6 pounds. But more than that, her face looked different. The puffiness was gone, her eyes were brighter. She looked like herself again, or maybe like a version of herself she'd never fully met. At her follow-up appointment, Dr. Ramirez pulled up her chart and frowned, then smiled. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," she said. "Your fasting glucose dropped 12 points. Blood pressure is down. Liver enzymes are improving." Sarah felt something unfamiliar. Pride. Not the shaky, fragile kind that came from willpower, the quiet, solid kind that came from rhythm. But not everyone saw it that way. At work, her manager, Todd, noticed she wasn't staying late anymore. She left at 5:30 now every day to get home in time for her 6 p.m. dinner window. One afternoon, he stopped by her desk. "You've been leaving early a lot," he said, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" Sarah looked up from her screen. "I'm leaving on time," she said, "not early." Todd shifted his weight. "Yeah, but we've got that big project coming up. I just want to make sure you're still, committed." The old Sarah would have apologized, stayed late, brought work home, eaten fast food at her desk at 9 p.m. to prove she was serious. But the new Sarah, the one who had learned to eat kimchi with her morning eggs, who sat on the floor every evening, who washed her dishes in cold water and slept in a cool room, looked at Todd and said, "I'm committed, but I'm also not going to burn out to prove it." Todd blinked, nodded slowly and walked away. Sarah's hands were shaking, but she didn't take it back. At lunch, her co-worker Jenny slid into the seat across from her. Sarah had packed her meal that morning, a small container of brown rice, steamed vegetables, a boiled egg, and a side of kimchi in a tiny glass jar. Jenny stared at it. "Is that pickled cabbage?" "Kimchi," Sarah said. "It's fermented. Good for your gut." Jenny wrinkled her nose. "You know you can just, eat normal food and go to the gym, right? You don't have to do this whole Korean thing." Sarah paused, chopsticks in hand. A month ago, that comment would have made her shrink, apologize, hide the kimchi jar in her bag. But now she just looked at Jenny and said, "I tried the gym. I tried normal food. I tried everything. This is the first thing that actually feels good." Jenny shrugged, unconvinced, and pulled out her phone. But later that afternoon, Sarah saw her Googling benefits of fermented foods. The hardest moment came on a Friday night. Sarah's sister, Claire, was in town and wanted to grab dinner at their favorite Italian place. Sarah agreed, but when they sat down and the bread basket arrived, she felt the old panic rising. The menu was full of cream sauces, oversized portions, wine. All the things she'd been quietly avoiding, not because they were forbidden, but because her body had started preferring something else. Claire ordered the carbonara and a glass of Pinot Grigio. Sarah ordered grilled fish and vegetables, no butter, with a side of miso soup she'd noticed tucked at the bottom of the menu. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You're really not going to have pasta? Or bread?" "I'm just not that hungry for it," Sarah said. Claire leaned back, studying her. "You look different," she said. "Thinner, yeah, but also, I don't know, calmer?" Sarah smiled. "I feel calmer." Claire picked at her pasta, then set down her fork. "How are you doing this? Every time you've tried to lose weight before, you've been miserable. You'd weigh everything, skip meals, then binge on weekends. You'd cry about it. This time you're just fine." Sarah thought about how to explain it. The floor, the kimchi jar, the cold showers, the early dinners, the walking, the breath. The way Mrs. Park moved through her tiny Seoul-style apartment, like someone who had never once fought her own body. "I'm not trying to lose weight," Sarah said. "I'm trying to live differently. The weight is just adjusting." Claire looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "I want that." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. "Then stop trying to force it. Just change the environment, change the rhythm. The body will follow." That night, Sarah walked home instead of calling an Uber. The city was cold. the air sharp in her lungs. She thought about Todd, about Jenny, about Claire, about how hard it was to change when everyone around you expected you to stay the same, about how lonely it felt to choose rest in a culture that worshipped exhaustion. But when she got home and saw the ceramic kimchi jar on her counter, quiet, patient, alive, she felt something settle. This wasn't a diet, this wasn't a trend, this was her life now. And her body, finally, was starting to remember what it felt like to be cared for instead of controlled. Would you rather force yourself with willpower or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. The crisis came in April, 6 weeks into Sarah's new rhythm. The company announced a major client pitch, 3 weeks to prepare, with presentations, prototypes, and late-night strategy sessions. Todd called an all-hands meeting and laid it out. Mandatory overtime, weekend work, catered dinners in the office. The energy in the room was tense, electric. Everyone nodded. This was the job. This was what you signed up for. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The old fear crept back in. If I don't do this, I'll be seen as weak, uncommitted, replaceable. That night, she stood in her kitchen staring at the ceramic jar. Mrs. Park had refilled it for her last week, teaching her how to make kimchi herself. The slow layering of cabbage, the paste of garlic and ginger and chili, the patient waiting as bacteria did their work. Sarah opened the lid and breathed in the sharp, living smell. She thought about the last 6 weeks, the walking, the floor, the small plates, the early dinners, the cold showers, the breath. The way her body had started to soften, not in surrender, but in trust. She'd lost 9 pounds. Her labs were better, her sleep was deeper, but more than that, she felt present in her own life for the first time in years, and now the job was asking her to give it all back. The first week of overtime, Sarah tried to compromise. She stayed late on Monday and Tuesday, eating the catered pizza and drinking the free Red Bull, working until 10 p.m. By Wednesday, her stomach was bloated again. Her sleep was shallow. Her skin looked dull. She stood in the bathroom mirror Thursday morning and saw the puffiness creeping back into her face. At lunch, she texted Mrs. Park, "I don't know how to do this. Work is demanding everything." Mrs. Park replied an hour later, "Come over tonight. I'll make soup." Sarah left the office at 5:45, ignoring Todd's raised eyebrow. When she got to Mrs. Park's apartment, the old woman was at her low table, chopping vegetables with slow, deliberate strokes. The smell of simmering bone broth filled the room. "Sit," Mrs. Park said. Sarah sank onto the cushion, her body folding naturally now, her hips loose, her core engaged. Mrs. Park poured her tea and set a bowl of miyok guk, seaweed soup, in front of her. "You are trying to do 2 lives at once," Mrs. Park said. "The old life and the new life. It doesn't work." "But I need this job," Sarah said. "I can't just quit." "I didn't say quit," Mrs. Park replied. "I said choose. You can work hard. But you can't work like someone who doesn't have a body." Sarah stared into her soup. The steam rose in slow curls, carrying the scent of ocean and time. She thought about the Korean concept of jong, a kind of deep, slow connection built through consistent presence. Her body was trying to build jong with her, but the job kept demanding speed, urgency, sacrifice. "What did you do when you worked?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Park smiled. "I worked in a garment factory in Seoul for 30 years. Long hours, hard work, but I always walked home. I always ate dinner at the same time. I always slept in a cool room. The work could have my time, but not my rhythm." Sarah nodded slowly. She understood now. It wasn't about quitting. It was about boundaries, about protecting the rhythms that kept her body sane. The next day, she went to Todd's office. "I can work the extra hours," she said, "but I need to leave by 6:30 every night to eat dinner at home, and I'm not working weekends. I'll get the work done, but I need those boundaries." Todd looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language, but something in her voice, calm, sure, non-negotiable, made him nod. "Okay," he said, "but if the work doesn't get done—" "It will," Sarah said. And it did. She worked faster, clearer, more focused. She stopped scrolling her phone between tasks. She stopped attending meetings that didn't need her. She said no to things that weren't essential. She left at 6:30, walked home, ate her small portions of rice and vegetables and kimchi, washed her dishes in cold water, and slept deeply in her cool room. The client pitch was a success. The company won the contract. And when Todd sent an email thanking the team, he copied Sarah and added, "Special recognition to Sarah for keeping her focus and delivering under pressure." Jenny stopped by her desk the next day, holding a small glass jar. "I bought kimchi," she said, almost embarrassed. "I thought I'd try it." Sarah smiled. "Start small, just a spoonful with breakfast." Jenny nodded, then hesitated. "You were right, you know, about the environment thing. I've been eating at my desk for 2 years and wondering why I feel like shit all the time." "So stop eating at your desk," Sarah said. "Just like that?" "Just like that." That night, Sarah sat on her floor, folding laundry in the low light. Her body felt strong, supple, alive. She thought about the ceramic jar on her counter, about how fermentation required time, patience, the right environment. You couldn't rush it, you couldn't force it. You just had to create the conditions and let the process do its work. Her waist had shrunk 2 more inches. Her jeans were loose now, but that wasn't the transformation. The transformation was this. She no longer hated her body. She no longer saw it as the enemy. She saw it as a living thing that responded to care, to rhythm, to respect. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was winning, not against her body, but with it. It was a Saturday in late April when the central secret revealed itself. Sarah was at Mrs. Park's apartment, learning how to make doenjang jjigae, fermented soybean paste stew. The kitchen smelled earthy, rich, alive. Mrs. Park stood at the low counter, her movements slow and precise, while Sarah knelt on a cushion chopping vegetables. "You move different now," Mrs. Park said, not looking up from the pot. Sarah paused, knife in hand. "What do you mean? When you first came here, you moved like someone being chased. Now you move like someone walking home." The words landed softly, but they hit deep. Sarah set down the knife and looked at her hands. They were calmer. She was calmer. The constant internal noise, the mental calculator of calories, the anxiety about weight, the shame spiral every time she saw herself in a mirror, had gone quiet. "I thought the problem was my body," Sarah said slowly. "I thought if I could just control it enough, punish it enough, force it enough, then I'd be okay." Mrs. Park turned off the stove and sat down across from her. "Your body was never the problem," she said. "The problem was the world you put your body in. No sleep, no rhythm, no rest. Processed food, sitting all day, stress with no release. You were asking a human body to live like a machine. It couldn't, so it broke down." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about every diet she'd tried, every workout plan, every time she'd stood on the scale and felt like a failure, every time she'd looked at thin women online and wondered what was wrong with her. "The culture I grew up in taught me that discipline meant suffering," Sarah said. "That if it didn't hurt, it didn't count. That rest was lazy, that my body was something to conquer." Mrs. Park nodded. "In Korea, we say the body is like a house. You can yell at a house all you want, but if the foundation is broken, the roof leaks, the windows are cracked, it doesn't matter how much you yell. You have to fix the structure." Sarah wiped her eyes. "So the 8 habits, they weren't really about my waist, were they?" "No," Mrs. Park said gently. "They were about teaching your body that it's safe, that it can rest, that you won't starve it or freeze it or keep it awake all night or flood it with cortisol. Once the body feels safe, it stops holding on so tight." Sarah understood now. The fat around her waist hadn't been stubbornness, it had been protection. Her body had been storing energy because it didn't trust that more was coming. It had been inflamed because her nervous system never turned off. It had been exhausted because she'd treated sleep like an inconvenience instead of a biological necessity. The habits hadn't shrunk her waist through force, they'd shrunk it through safety. So when the documentary said 21 days, Sarah started. "That's for the algorithm," Mrs. Park said, smiling. "Real change takes months, years, a lifetime, but people click on 21 days. They both laughed. Sarah looked at the ceramic kimchi jar on the counter, the one Mrs. Park had given her on that first visit. It sat there, quiet and patient, doing its slow work of fermentation. No rush, no force, just time, temperature, and the right conditions. "I kept thinking I needed more discipline," Sarah said. "More willpower, more control." "Willpower is a muscle," Mrs. Park said. "It gets tired. But environment never gets tired. If your fridge has good food, you eat good food. If your bedroom is cool and dark, you sleep well. If your floor is clear, you sit on it. If your table has small plates, you eat small portions. You don't have to fight, you just live." Sarah thought about her apartment now, how different it looked from 2 months ago. The clutter was gone. The delivery containers were gone. There was space, order, calm. Her phone charged in the kitchen at night, not on her nightstand. Her blackout curtains were replaced with sheer ones that let in morning light. Her pantry had rice, vegetables, fermented foods. Her couch was no longer the center of her life. The floor was. She hadn't white-knuckled her way into these changes. She'd just made one small shift, then another, until the environment itself carried her. "I think I've been angry at myself for so long," Sarah said quietly. "Angry for failing, angry for being tired, angry for not being perfect." Mrs. Park reached across the table and took her hand. "The body forgives faster than the mind," she said. "Your body has already let go of the anger. Now you have to." That night, Sarah walked home slowly, the cool spring air filling her lungs. She thought about the moment she'd knocked on Mrs. Park's door 2 months ago. Desperate, exhausted, ashamed. She thought about how simple the habits had seemed at first. Walk more, sit on the floor, eat fermented foods, small portions, early dinners, cold exposure, slow breathing, eat with others. But what had really changed wasn't her waist. It was her relationship with herself. She wasn't at war with her body anymore. She wasn't trying to punish it into submission. She was caring for it, listening to it, trusting it. And the body, finally, was responding. Not with miracles, but with what it had always been capable of. Balance, healing, and a quiet, sustainable kind of strength. 6 months later, Sarah stood in Dr. Ramirez's office, looking at her lab results. The numbers told a story. Fasting glucose normal, cholesterol down, liver enzymes back in range, blood pressure 118/76. Dr. Ramirez leaned back in her chair and smiled. "Whatever you're doing, don't stop," she said. "These are the kind of results I usually only see with medication." "No medication," Sarah said. "Just a different life." She'd lost 14 pounds total. Her waist had shrunk 4 inches. But when people asked her how she did it, she never knew quite what to say. "I learned to sit on the floor. I started eating pickled cabbage. I washed my dishes in cold water." It sounded absurd, and yet it was the truth. The real change wasn't visible on the scale. It was in the way she moved through her days. She walked everywhere now. To the grocery store, to the coffee shop, to the park on weekends. Her body was strong, flexible, awake. She sat on the floor every evening, her hips open, her core engaged, folding laundry or reading while her posture quietly sculpted itself. She ate 3 small meals a day, always with kimchi, always with variety, always with attention. No measuring, no counting, just eating like a human who trusted her body's signals. Dinner at 6 p.m., kitchen closed by 7. 14-hour overnight fast that felt less like restriction and more like rest. Her bedroom was cool at night, her phone charging in the kitchen, her sleep deep and dreamless. She woke without an alarm most mornings, her body's circadian rhythm finely aligned. She breathed slowly, deliberately, her nervous system calm. And she never ate alone. She invited Jenny over once a week, hosted her sister for Sunday dinners, joined Mrs. Park and the Korean church group for monthly potlucks. At work, Todd had stopped questioning her boundaries. The team had noticed. Sarah was more focused, more productive, more present than she'd been in years. She left at 6:30 every day, and the work still got done. Better even. Jenny had started sitting on the floor during lunch, eating from smaller plates, keeping a jar of kimchi in the office fridge. She'd lost 7 pounds without trying, and more importantly, she'd stopped complaining about being tired all the time. "I thought you were crazy," Jenny admitted one afternoon, "but I feel better." "Like actually better?" Sarah smiled. "You're not fighting your body anymore. You're just living in a way that makes sense for a body." Claire had visited last month and spent the weekend at Sarah's apartment. She'd watched Sarah prepare meals, move through her routines, sit on the floor with tea in the evenings. On the last night, Claire said quietly, "I want to learn how to do this." So Sarah taught her. The walking, the floor, the fermentation, the small plates, the cold water, the meal timing, the breathing, the community. And Claire went home with a small ceramic jar of kimchi and a promise to check in every week. One evening in early fall, Sarah sat on her floor with Mrs. Park drinking tea. The older woman looked at her with something like pride. "You understand now," she said. "It was never about the waste." "No," Sarah said. "It was about remembering that I'm not a machine. I'm a body, a living body that needs rhythm, rest, real food, and respect." Mrs. Park nodded. "In Korea we say, 몸이 천냥이면 마음은 만냥. If the body is worth 1,000, the mind is worth 10,000. You cannot separate them. When you care for the body, the mind heals. When you calm the mind, the body releases." Sarah set down her tea and looked at the ceramic jar on the counter. The same one Mrs. Park had shown her on that first morning. The one that had sat quietly fermenting while Sarah's entire life transformed around it. "That jar," Sarah said. "It was the first thing you showed me." "Because it teaches patience," Mrs. Park said. "You can't rush fermentation. You can't force it. You can only create the right conditions and wait. The body is the same. You created the right conditions. The body did the rest." Sarah thought about the thousands of dollars she'd spent on gym memberships, diet programs, supplements, meal plans, the years of shame, frustration, and self-hatred, and how all of it had melted away, not through force, but through something much simpler, small, consistent, culturally grounded habits that redesigned her environment and taught her body it was safe. That night, Sarah opened her journal, a habit Mrs. Park had suggested, and wrote, "It's been 6 months. The waist shrunk, the labs improved, the sleep deepened. But the real transformation was this. I stopped hating myself. I stopped seeing my body as the enemy. I learned that discipline isn't suffering, it's structure. That rest isn't lazy, it's essential. That food isn't punishment or reward, it's just food. And that the wisdom I needed wasn't in a pill or a program or an influencer's post. It was in a jar of kimchi, sitting on an old Korean grandmother's counter, quietly doing its work. She closed the journal and looked around her apartment. The space was calm, ordered, alive. The floor was clear. The fridge held real food. The ceramic jar sat on the counter, fermenting. Her body felt strong, rested, present, and for the first time in years she felt like she was home, not in a place, but in herself. The documentary had promised results in 21 days. The algorithm loved that number. But real change, the kind that lasted, the kind that healed, took longer. It took months of walking, of sitting on the floor, of eating small portions with attention, of sleeping in cool rooms, of breathing slowly, of sharing meals, of trusting the process. It took a ceramic jar, an old woman's patience, and the willingness to believe that the body wasn't broken. It had just been living in a broken world. And now, finally, It was living in a world that made sense. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.